welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Very, very much appreciated. Also, what was very much appreciated was a lovely email I got from Eden Mill. They obviously really enjoyed my review of their whiskey and asked if they could use some of the comments on their website, which I thought was very, very cool. So yeah, a good episode of the show all round, I think. The thing about the show is, as I probably say, and maybe I don't say often enough, is that it really does rely on the generosity of distilleries, independent bottling companies, and you guys, the viewers, that every now and again send me some samples of random stuff, which is why I'm doing a random episode of viewers' choices, I suppose, for want of a better word. Now there are a couple of samples that I have here in today's lineup that I'm not really too sure who sent them to me. So if you did send them to me and you are watching the show and I haven't given you a thank you, then I do appreciate you sending the samples. I do get sent an awful lot of samples, and I should probably keep a better track of who sends me what. In actual fact, the one of the ones I'm referring to is this bottling of Cadenheads, Annandale, which I thought came from Ian Sunderland. But then I realised that the writing on the label was far too legible, so it couldn't have been his. But I have got samples from good friends Christopher Canning, Yossi Swinger, Richard Hall, and Guy Dutton. And like I said, I think there's a couple of ones, like I said, that Annandale and the Speyside, which I'm not entirely sure who kindly gave me the samples, but if it was you, then very, very much appreciated, and obviously hopefully you'll enjoy my review of them. So there's kind of not an awful lot to say apart from, like I said, really appreciate your support, and yeah, let's kick off with the lineup then, shall we? Right, okay, so I'm going to kick off with a 9-year-old Ben Nevis. So this has been bottled by Duncan Taylor in their Battlehill range. It's been finished in an ex-Cognac cask, bottled at 46%, and bottled in 2022. And I've always liked the Battlehill range. They've, like every independent, they've bottled some great stuff in that range, and maybe some not so great stuff. They don't seem to bottle an awful lot these days, or certainly not as much as they used to do in years gone by. I remember some lovely bottlings of Imperial that they bottled in that particular range many years ago. So quite looking forward to that. I think that'll be a nice one to start off with. Then we're going to jump age statements quite considerably. This is a sample that I believe came from Christopher Canning. This is a Whisky Sponge 29-year-old old Rhosdhu. I think it's called edition number 67, distilled in 1993, bottled in 2022 at 57.1%, and a single refill bourbon hogshead. So as a number of you will know, obviously old Rhosdhu back then was a single malt that was produced at Loch Lomond. Nowadays, I believe, at least internally, it's the name used for the malted barley mash that they pass through their columns still, and I don't think it's actually currently used as a bottling at the moment, at least not by the distillery anyway. Third bottling in the Glenfiddich bottle. I mean, I don't mind how the samples get to me. It's, as I say, the juice in the bottle that matters rather than the bottle itself. So this is a Master of Malt Campbeltown, 8-year-old, distilled in April of 2014, bottled in February of 2023 at 54.9%, a mixture of refill Oloroso and refill Oloroso octaves. Now obviously being labelled as a Campbeltown, it could have been a Springbank, unlikely because they'd have probably called it Springbank, so it's obviously a vatting of probably Springbank and Glen Scotia, but we'll see if there's any spirit character underneath the sherry, and whether that indeed gives us an idea of the makeup of it. Like I said, next bottling is an Cadenheads Authentic Collection Annandale, 8 years old. It's lightly peated, or their lightly peated spirit, distilled in 2015, I think bottled last year. at 53.6%, and American oak could be refill, maybe first fill, not entirely sure, haven't got a note of that, but again we'll probably find out. I certainly know that the distillery themselves use refill, first fill and virgin American oak, so it could be one of the three, and hopefully we'll find out. Next bottling I believe came from Guy Dutton. This is a single cask nation Benrinnes 11-year-old. Never heard of Single Cask Nation, it has to be said. They're a completely new independent bottling company to me. So this is a single first fill sherry hoggy, 309616, bottled at 53.2%, distilled in September of 2011, bottled in March of 2023. And finally, look at the colour of that. I mean, that's the colour of old engine oil or possibly old olive oil maybe, or something like that. I mean, it really has a sort of green tinge to it. I mean, it's kind of, I have seen sherries of very, very old sherries that have that kind of character, or that kind of colour I should say. So yeah, probably not expecting an awful lot of distillery character out of that one. So that's a Bartels Whisky Speyside Distillery 23-year-old. Obviously a sherry cask, bottled at 49.6, distilled in 1995, bottled in 2018, and I think that came from Guy, but he assures me that it probably didn't. So whoever sent me that sample, thank you very much. I look forward to that. Okay, so let's kick off with a bit of Duncan Taylor Battlehill then, shall we? It's okay, so 9 years old, Ben Nevis. Let's see what the nose is on this end, shall we? It's a little on the raw side, it has to be said. There's a definite alcohol prickle, almost a fainty note. There's that sort of classic kind of bready Ben Nevis-y character, a little bit of dried apple, touch of wood smoke. It's just a little young, I think. Could have done with a little bit more time in the cask, or in probably in either of the casks, I think. I mean, it's nicely balanced. I mean, yep, get some distillery character, get some American oak character, get some cognac notes. The finish is quite subtle, although it is starting to come through a bit more strongly as it's been sat in the glass. And when you sort of, if you aerate it, you seem to get more of the American oak character and the spirit character as opposed to the cognac cask. So yeah, it's okay. I mean, I'm not going to sort of, you know, rave about it, but I don't think it's dreadful by any shot. Anyway, let's see what that's like. Again, it's a bit on the young side. It's a bit kind of a bit fainty. There's more spirit character on the palate. It kind of kicks off with that sort of bready, Ben Nevis-y maltiness. There's a lightness there, which is obviously coming from the cognac cask. It's not. It's got some weight to it. I mean, Ben Nevis does. It's got a nice finish actually. Nice kind of notes of ginger and a little bit of spice. And the cognac cask comes through quite pleasantly on the aftertaste. It just would have benefited from another year or so in the cask. I think that was destined to be a lovely whiskey, and I just think that was kind of rushed out a little bit too soon, I think. Which is unfortunately often the case these days. But anyway, let's move on. Okay, so let's move on to the Whisky Sponge Old Rhosdhu. Again, another independent bottling company that I know absolutely nothing about. I think I've only ever encountered a couple of their Springbank bottlings, I think. But anyway, let's see what the nose good is. Right, okay, so, right, you can't accuse this of being too young. It's got a lovely mellowness. It's not showing 29 years old, but then Loch Lomond has this weird tendency not to really show its age at all. There's a little bit of that sort of funkiness, but not too much. There's some lovely mature honey, old honey, straw, a little bit of citrus, a bit of lime. The oak is kind of slowly developing. Again, while it's sat here in the glass, the oak is coming through a little bit more strongly. It's got that slightly creamy, toffeed kind of edge. I mean, that's a lovely nose, it has to be said. I mean, that's kind of encapsulates to me sort of Loch Lomond. Yes, there is that little element of funkiness, but not too much funkiness. You know, it's saying Loch Lomond, but a sort of, you know, polite version of Loch Lomond, if you like. Lovely maturity. The oak is now starting to show a little bit of that kind of sawdusty character. Yeah, lovely. Really, very, very good cask. It has to be said. Let's see what the price like. More oak on the palate. Kind of kicks off with more of that toffee, creamy oak. Then we're moving into the slightly sort of funky, oily barley, citrus. Some lovely kind of macerated, mature fruit. A little bit masked, although the oak does kind of return on the finish with that sort of slightly sawdusty, custardy powder kind of powdery, very powdery. And sawdusty kind of finish, masked as well. I think I'll put a little drop of water and just see if that makes any real noticeable change. Don't think it really overly needs it if you don't mind a little dryness and powderiness on the finish. Oh yeah, now it smells old. It won't go as far as saying creaking, but I'm now starting to get the sort of linseed oil and a little bit more funkiness. The fruit has just kind of fallen away now. It kind of, you know, you sort of smell this and you think, oh, it's kind of holding on by its fingernails. Yeah, don't think that's done it a whole lot of good, to be bluntly honest with you, putting the water with it. But let's see what the parts like now. Yeah, that is creaking a little bit, it has to be said. It's got kind of, yeah, lanolin and fatty oils. Still a little bit of mature oak, but nowhere near as interesting and complex. It's got a little bit of cardboard now on the aftertaste, which is just getting on my nerves a little bit. So yes, and this is often the way with old whiskies that are well above sort of 50%. I found, you know, sometimes you put a little drop of water with it and they do creak enormously, but neat, they're absolutely fine. And so it's, you know, it's a sort of a bottle you just don't put any water with, just drink it neat. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Campbeltown. So 8 years old, Master of Malt. Let's see what the nose gives on this end, shall we? It's a bit of a hard nose, it has to be said. It's got that sort of irony kind of character. Green fruit, smoked meat, meaty peat. Quite subtle peat in actual fact. It's not a sort of, not hugely peated. There's a good dollop of Oloroso. It's got a little bit of sulphur. There's a little bit of fishiness. Yeah, I can see why these casks were kind of flogged off. It's kind of not the cleanest, but then, you know, there's a lot of you guys that love this sort of slightly dirty Campbeltown character. It's certainly got plenty of Springbank character. It's got that kind of fishy Springbank character. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of one of those kind of, yeah, kind of whiskies. There's things to like about it and things not to like about it so much. But like I said, it's not too dirty, it's not too sulphury, and I could live with this. But yeah, it does kind of stick out and jar for me a little bit. Anyway, let's see what the parts like. fishy, malty, tight as hell, lots of tannin, a little bit of sulphur again, a little bit of that funk, Campbeltown funk, quite oily, malty, certainly getting a little bit more Glen Scotia on the palate, it has to be said. That sort of weighty, sort of malty Glen Scotia character does seem to come through on the finish. A little bit of salted fish, but plenty of Oloroso tannins. It really is pretty drying, it has to be said. But you know, the upside is it's not quite so dirty on the palate. Let's see what a little drop of water does to the nose. Right, well that cleans it up quite a bit. I'm getting more lighter, more spirit, less Oloroso. Brings out some sort of lovely oily vanillins, a little bit of almost grass as well. That's a lot better. Now, this is one of these whiskies that's really helped putting a little drop of water with. Yeah, I much prefer this slightly diluted. Let's see what the palate's like now. It's a bit of a tale of two halves. Again, it's cleaner. There's less of the funk, less of the dirtiness, less of the Oloroso. It's a little vague, possibly. There's some toffee, there's some violet notes. Tannins are less gritty, but they're still noticeable. Touch of coffee as well. I think overall, I prefer that with a little drop of water. Less of the funkiness, and I can live with a little vagueness, shall we say. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Cadenheads Annandale. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Now, I kind of like that because it's a weird nose, it has to be said. It's kind of rose petal, rose oil and peat. It's kind of a bit like peated Loch Lomond in actual fact, but kind of cleaner, if you like, less funky. There's some white fruit, some straw, lime, barley, kind of almost kind of Riesling-esque petrol-y kind of note. It appeals to me. I like this kind of nose. It's weird and slightly odd, but not too weird to be overly weird, if you see what I mean. It's kind of got controlled weirdness. Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? Quote me on that one. Controlled weirdness. I like it. I think it's a great nose. I love that. I mean, that's got an awful lot of character for a really young spirit. Now, I don't know what this retailed for. I haven't got a clue. Never looked it up. It's probably going for silly money now on the secondary market, but that's the secondary market for you. Anyway, let's see what the pals are. Yeah, it's 53.6, but it doesn't taste like it. I mean, that was really lovely, really juicy, really fruity, straw-like. Again, we're in that sort of old schooly kind of lowland style. Less peat, there's a slight sort of astringent peat note just coming through on the finish. A little bit of coffee, some toffee, a little bit more American oak. So I'm guessing possibly first fill. I mean, I know I have tasted some of the distillery refill bourbon bottlings, and they don't have an awful lot of character or oak character whatsoever. So it's just so kind of like with that in mind, it kind of feels like it's probably first fill American oak, but it's lovely. It's a lovely whiskey, really, really balanced, and I really like what Annandale are doing, and consequently, if you do live in Nottingham and do come to you know, my whiskey evenings, then we do have Annandale coming down later on this year. Forget the exact date, but they'll be showcasing their spirits. So anyway, just pop along to the Gauntlet's website and you'll find out the date. Now the nose is lovely. I mean. Oily barley, straw, petrol, oily banana skin, marzipan, it's similar to how it was neat. There's a little bit of a more youthful edge coming through now, but it's very much similar to how it was without being diluted. Let's see what the palate's like. That's brought out more oils. White chocolate, getting loads of white chocolate. White chocolate and banana. I prefer dark chocolate personally, but you know, that's a pleasant palate. A little bit of almost kind of berry fruit as well. Straw again, barley. That was very, very good. Really enjoyed that. That was nice. Right, okay, so time to tackle some sherry monsters then. Anyway, so this is the first of the two. This is the single cask nation 11-year-old Benrinnes, and first fill sherry hoggy. Right, okay. No distillery character whatsoever. First and foremost, not a surprise there. It's a very herbal, sort of almost kind of Langerton-esque kind of nose. Provençal herbs, toasty oak, treacle, raisinated fruits. A little bit sugary, I will have to say. Very sweet, very, very treacly for, I don't even know, it could actually be a PX cask. No, I think it's an Oloroso. I don't think it's treacly enough for a PX cask, but it is kind of dark chocolate, that kind of thing. It's a sherry monster, no distillery character. And it doesn't have enough age to have any more secondary character. There's no oxidation, there's no anything like that. It is just basically big fat sherry. Touch of tea leaf now. Anyway, let's see what the pan's like. Big, sherry, treacly, raisinated fruit, lots and lots of sherry character, no distillery character. You know, what is, you know, not a surprise really, looking at the colour of that. Raisinated fruit, burnt raisins, spicy, marsh, tannic. It's just all about the cask at the end of the day, and it's just, as I keep going on and on and on, has no balance. It is just far too influenced by the cask, and it's sort of like, it could be any distillery, could be from anywhere. I know there are people that love this kind of stuff, but to me, I'd get bored just drinking this stuff, you know. I'd be going, okay, it's a Benrinnes, well, it tastes of sherry. It's a Longbourn, it tastes of sherry. Oh, look, that's a Kalila. Oh, I get a bit of peat now, but still tastes of sherry, you know. But it's just kind of, why? What is the point? I really just do not see the attraction whatsoever. Let's see if a little drop of water kind of mitigates any of the... No, it doesn't mitigate any of the sherry. It's deadfastly refusing to budge. It is still sherried and sweeter. Now that I've taken the edge off the alcohol, it is sweeter sherry. It is kind of... Yeah, let's see what the pal's like. Toasty, green. We're not quite sulphured, but we're moving there. I mean, I've got that kind of green, I wouldn't quite say fizziness, it's got a kind of almost a petulance, I guess. Not my kind of thing, it has to be said. And like I said, it's not that it's a bad whiskey. I mean, there is that movement towards the sulphur end of the spectrum, and that's just my palate and the fact that I do pick up sulphur notes, unfortunately, rather easily. But overall, you know, like I say, if you're the kind of person that loves this kind of homogeneous sherry kind of stuff, then brilliant, you'll love it, you'll buy it, you know, you'll kind of get off on it. For me, it's too one-dimensional at the end of the day. Okay, so let's move on to the Speyside 23-year-old. See what the nose gives us on this sherry monster then, shall we? Now the thing is that if I'm going to drink a sherry monster, I want something with some age. I want something, I mean, again, no Speyside character. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that Speyside was synonymous with back in the day. I mean, since then they have gone sort of more, and rightly so, because their spirit is actually really very, very good. It's not sort of industrial. It's not Glenrothes or Glenfarclas. It's not that kind of hard spirit that needs sherry. It's actually quite a lovely spirit, quite fruity in actual fact. But this has all those wonderful secondary characteristics. Like I said, it's got oxidation character, it's got licorice, wheat biscuits, burnt raisin, almost kind of off-sweet black fruit, earth, cigar leaf, pepper. I mean, it's the combination of sherry and oxidation which gives it now more complexity than the Benrinnes could ever have. But then it's doubly aged, so that you would expect that. And I mean, obviously I'm not mega wealthy. I don't have the sort of like the unlimited whiskey budget to buy these kind of old sherry monsters, but you know, if I was gonna dabble in a bit of sherry, this is the sort of thing I would do, because it has that sort of oxidized aged rancio. There's even a bit of kind of almost kind of brandy butter. I mean, it is really complex, but the complexity is within the oxidation and the sherry cask. It's a bit kind of like sort of Octomore. The complexity of Octomore always lies within the variety and the breadth of the peat flavours and characteristics, and so this is kind of winning to a certain extent within the breadth of the sort of oxidation and the sherry character, if that kind of makes a great deal of sense. Anyway, let's see what the powder's like. Quite light in body in actual fact, not too heavy. I mean, again, lots of that sort of mature sherry character, sort of dark marzipan, dried fruit, raisins, a little bit of herbally oloroso, a little bit of burnt wood, spice, plenty of oxidized fruit, old macerated fruit, old sherry tannins, old wood. You can taste that is an old whiskey, it has to be said, and it is very heavily influenced by the cask, obviously. But there's a little bit of dark olive oil, a bit of oiliness, bit of dried citrus peel, leafy oloroso, leafy herbs, a little bit of wood smoke, almost kind of a little bit of peat smoke as well. I mean, this is very, very complex. But like I said, the complexity is derived from the fact that it's spent 20 odd years in a cask and oxidized. So it's all about the cask and the aging, and it's, from a technical perspective, it's really, really intriguing, really interesting. It's probably going to cost you an arm and a leg, it has to be said, but you know, if you're going to do sherry, just do sherry with some age, just to, you know, because it does have a lot more character, a lot more interest than say the Benrinnes. So so yeah, there you have it. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Well, firstly, a big thank you to you guys that kindly sent in the samples, even though I can't remember a couple of people that sent me them, so like I said, I do apologise for that. The Battlehill Ben Nevis, bit too young. Probably could have done with another couple of years aging in one or t'other of the casks. There was still that sort of like, you know, rawness to the spirit. I think that was just kind of bottled at the wrong time. The old Rhosdhu, one of those kind of classic old whiskies, absolutely fantastic without being diluted. As soon as you dilute it, whoa, cracks start to show there, and it's kind of hanging on by its fingertips. So I'm always kind of torn by these whiskies, it has to be said, because they're not cheap. You know, they are sort of like 3 figures, and you know, quite substantial 3 figures in some cases, and I'm always torn by them because part of me says, all right, okay, yes, drink it without any water. Please do not put any water with it. It's a great whiskey without being diluted, as long as you can cope with the fact that it's a little bit masked, it's a little bit kind of powdery and what have you. But the trouble is, people have a tendency to put water with it, and then they go, "Good God, I've spent 300 quid on that," and it's, you know. And so it is, from a retailer's kind of point of view, a bit of a kind of minefield. Those kind of things, it has to be said. And there are sometimes I will stock it because I just think, and I will basically go, please, 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 do not put any water with this because this is just a bloody good whiskey, you know. But you know, that's the way of these things. The Master of Malt Campbeltown, yeah, it's all right, I suppose. It kind of does what it says on the tin, I suppose. It's very indicative of Campbeltown. There was a little bit of sort of sulphury, funky kind of dirtiness, but then, you know, there are an awful lot of people that love Springbank that are quite happy with that. So, you know, I guess from that kind of point of view, it kind of works. Annandale was absolutely fantastic. I mean, it is. I mean, it's sort of, you know, one of those kind of whiskies that really shouldn't be bottled at a young age. It's not distilled or produced in a kind of modern lowland estuary fruity big fruit style. It's kind of, you know, more traditional Bladnocky kind of style lowland, and you really shouldn't be bottling that at 8 years old, but it works great, wonderful. The Benrinnes, yeah, it was a very young and very heavily sherried monster at the end of the day, and yeah, just lacked some light and shade. The Bartels Speyside, still not the biggest fan of that kind of style, it has to be said, but you know, if you're going to do sherry with a shitload of age, basically. And you can quote me on that. If you're going to do sherry with a shitload of age, because it has the oxidation character. It's almost kind of almost kind of cognac-y or armagnac-y or what have you, because that's basically an awful lot of old armagnacs and cognacs are very much about oak and oxidation. Although there are some that do still inherently have some spirit character, I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that particular bottling, that Speyside, was very much old oak, oxidation, and yeah, complexity based on those two elements, shall we say. So in that respect, yeah, good fun. Yeah. Anyway, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. Yeah, please keep kindly sending me your samples, and I will every now and again kind of do a kind of a viewer's choice episode of the show. I know that both James and Richard have sent me a load of samples of another independent bottling company's releases, which I will hopefully do at some stage this year, probably sooner rather than later, I hope. And yeah, please keep kindly sending me samples. So anyway, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's kind of nice, January being a bit of a dead month whiskey wise. It kind of allows me the opportunity to kind of catch up on all these interesting episodes, hopefully, before I have to sort of start sort of like doing the bit of a hard sell on the new stuff. So yeah, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good dramming.